Okay, hi, I'm Alyssa.
Hi, I'm Caroline.
Hi, I'm Claire.
Hi, I'm Paige.
Hi, I'm Sammy.
Hi, I'm Sydney.
And then for our research topic, we looked into peer and romantic relationships and how they affect adolescent development. So a quick overview of the topics we'll be talking about. We're in general just going to talk about the importance of relationships and then break them down into the two important relationships of peer relationships and romantic relationships and how they each individually impact adolescent development. And then we're going to look at some more like specific factors that drive adolescents and their engagement with these relationships and how they influence how they interact, such as social media, culture, and then COVID-19. So why are relationships so important to adolescents? Adolescent relationships act as one of the most important and influential driving forces of their development. At this stage in life, we see that adolescents tend to turn away from their parents and adults and look to those peers to help learn the cultures and norms, the ways to navigate society and find their sense of belonging and develop that personal and like sexual identities. These relationships tend to offer a safe and supportive place for adolescents to grow and explore these new identities. They are responsible for teaching them their emotional, cognitive, and social development and helping them develop into that full mature identity. And because these relationships are always changing throughout their adolescence, they will experience both the positive and negative sides of these relationships. So it's important that they are surrounded by these fully supportive and encouraging relationships, as we can see that these relationships impact adolescents and their commitment to the identity and have long-term effects into their adulthood, like how they influence their attachment systems, their career success, and their future social interactions. So essentially, it is important that adolescents are able to find these crucial connections in order to develop and help set them up for success.
So starting off looking specifically at peer relationships, peers are those individuals that are the same age group, maturity level, or status of another individual. Most of these relationships are created in school, at sports events, at religious gatherings, maybe in the neighborhood if they live close to one another. And research has found that over the years, children spend twice as much time with their peers as they do with their parents during the adolescent years. And so those interactions between peers are really important on a daily basis. But peer relationships impact their adolescent social development, their academic and extracurricular involvement, and their emotional and psychological well-being. The peer pressure happens as it's an influence to conform to standards or behaviors of others, and that's a result of peer relationships and spending time with individuals that are your own age. That typically happens between the ages of 14 and 16 is when that tends to spike. It's also been found that in research that adolescents are likely to behave the way that their peers are, whether that be negative or positive. So some of the positives of adolescents having peer relationships is that those peers can provide emotional support for when adolescents are going through a difficult time, whether that be the stressors of life or maybe some conflict between their family. And interacting with peers can help adolescents develop values and beliefs outside of their family and helps them to have a more well-rounded identity. Relationships also help adolescents to develop their social skills, to their communication. It helps with empathy and cooperation, learning those skills that they're going to use in the real world one day. Peer relationships can also provide adolescents with a sense of belonging and community. It helps them feel less alone when they're able to share unique qualities with another individual. Another positive is that they motivate adolescents to participate in extracurricular activities such as sports or clubs. You want to do things that your friends are doing for the most part. And peers can also motivate each other and encourage them to succeed in academics. But then to look at some negatives, peers can be influenced by each other to experiment with drugs and alcohol. And some peer conflicts, such as like exclusion, can lead adolescents to feel isolated from the group, which will help them, unfortunately, to develop a low self-worth. Peers that form exclusive cliques can create an uncomfortable social environment, whether that be at school, in the neighborhood, Peers that focus too much on their relationships with others, they might be a distraction from family or academics rather than encouraging them to succeed. And then lastly, peers that rely too heavily on others for validation can lead to an identity crisis and some codependency issues.
So the next topic that we looked at is romantic relationships. So when discussing this form of relationship, we define partner as a person with whom one shares an intimate relationship. And then for a visual reference point, I included a timeline of adolescence as defined by our textbook written by Sandrock. So according to the book, puberty begins around the ages of 11 to 13 years old. Obviously, this is different for everyone, but this is just a rough estimate. With this comes an interest in romance, so it drives conversations and it typically absorbs the minds of young teens. And then from ages 14 to 16, adolescents start getting involved in casual dating, which is where there is a mutual attraction between both members, both partners of the relationship. But also during this time, there is group dating, which is heavily peer influence. So it might be that their friend says, "Oh, this person's interested in you," and then it becomes a clique involved romantic relationship. But these are typically short term. They only last a couple weeks to maybe a few months at the maximum. And then by age 17 to 19 is when teens start to take their relationships a little bit deeper and create stronger emotional bonds with their partner. So, romantic relationships impact every area of development, but I highlighted a few here, starting with emotional development. It can create intense emotions such as joy, heartbreak, jealousy, and different attachment styles. If the teen has not been taught how to correctly handle these and manage them, it can cause them a lot of stress if this is the first time that they're experiencing them. Um, but then the positive outcome of that is that they can learn how to cope with complex feelings. And then they can also learn how to care for someone else. So their compassion and their empathy start to build from these types of relationships as well. Social development is also impacted. Shifts in these peer relationships can cause tension between friends. So if they're not used to having a relationship in the friend group and then they swap time for their partner with time that they used to spend with their friends, it can cause drama within their friends, which is another stressor for adolescents. And then being in a relationship can also enhance social status. So, if unfortunately we all know that there is a social hierarchy within schooling systems. So, if you are dating somebody who's maybe higher in the social ranks, then you grow in your social status. If you're dating someone who's maybe below, then you can drop in your social status. So, that is also pressure to conform with social norms, which can also be stressful for youth development. And then identity development was another big one that we found in our research. So, for gender and sexuality, it can help adolescents explore their preferences, who they're attracted to, and then who they identify as personally in their sexual life. Beliefs, they can begin to form ideas about what love means to them, how it should look and feel to them, and then what they value in a relationship. They sort of talk about these things and compare them with their peers. And then self esteem. Supportive relationships can boost confidence, but toxic relationships can harm it and lead to mental health complications. Unfortunately, adolescents experience every type of relationship on the spectrum. So, influences from both of these can cause mental health complications, but it can also teach them what their future patterns may look like as well.
So we also looked a little bit deeper into the positives and the negatives of these romantic relationships within adolescent years. To highlight some of the positives, it can heighten the levels of dopamine found when in a relationship. And these romantic relationships contribute to self-understanding and identity formation, which is really crucial during the adolescent years as well. These relationships also provide positive learning experiences related to self-worth and also that self-identity, figuring out who they are. And then these relationships also provide an opportunity to learn and manage strong emotions and deal with conflict, as well as providing an opportunity to explore and learn boundaries, consent, and further their sex education, which is also really important at this age as they continue to explore just different things within a relationship. And then lastly, an opportunity to develop appropriate attachment and bonding. But for every positive, there's a negative. So those not in a relationship can feel out of place with their peers, kind of relating back to what Sammy said about the conforming and the social hierarchy. Some adolescents may feel pressured to act a certain way in a relationship due to certain stereotypes or how they see their peers act in their relationships, and they might want to copy and think that if their relationship isn't like their peers, then something's wrong. But these relationships can also be a distraction from school, friends, family, and other priorities, maybe school sports or other activities. And they can also lead to issues with self-esteem, anxiety, and depression. There's also a heightened risk of abuse from a potential romantic partner, which is really rough to deal with, especially at a younger age. And then adolescents may isolate themselves from their peers and families due to these romantic relationships.
So the very first specific category of things that impact social media, well, impact relationships is social media. As everyone knows, social media has been a very, very growing thing, especially in the last couple years. And when you are on a social media platform, you can see a range from small children that are probably even pre-adolescent to people that are like in their 90s. And so when you're on social media, you get a really vast like opportunity to see things that you wouldn't normally see without social media. And so as technology continues to evolve, these social media platforms have become an integral part of adolescents' daily lives, which reshape how they interact with peers and navigate social relationships. Social media amplifies dynamics in peer relationships by providing platforms for both positive and negative interactions. So it's more gender specific than you would think. Girls are more likely to engage in emotionally supportive online interactions, but on the flip side, they are actually more vulnerable to increased pressure from posts related to appearance and social validation. And then boys face more competition or status-seeking behaviors online, which can also impact their self-esteem. Of course, this is changing due to gender roles changing in real life as well, but this is the most specific that I've seen so far. Adolescents also may gain relationships with predators or people that are going out of the way to fake being their age. And unfortunately, this is usually due to manipulation or the feeling of need to be like with somebody or knowing someone and being in a relationship, because being in a relationship is so important at this time. And so this can seriously affect them in the future because it can even traumatize them into relationships in the future. Romantic relationships are getting increased pressure from social media regarding relationship norms and behavior. Constant communication and jealousy from watching interactions online are the brunt of this pressure. Usually when there was no social media or much texting, people would have a lot more space. But now when everyone has connections to each other, you can text, you can see what people are doing, you can check people's locations, you can constantly ask them to hang out, which is either calling or even just texting each other. So you don't get much time apart. And there's also the fact that things get exaggerated online and can lead to misunderstandings or false hopes. So not everything you can trust online, but you don't fully know that when you're in a relationship either. And rumors can spread on there, and it can affect even in school. Social media, though, can help adolescents form and maintain these relationships because many couples actually can seek out emotional support and get ideas what a healthy relationship looks like and how to manage conflict. The next specific thing is culture and gender. There's two specific types and categories of culture is collectivism and individualism. In cultures that emphasize collectivism, adolescents may have less of control over their identity as they have a stronger sense of duty to their families and communities, which can influence their relationship. It's more their family before themselves. And with individualistic cultures, usually more Western cultures such as us, adolescents may have more freedom to explore relationships based on personal choice and individual desires. And then culture norms on gender roles and sexuality can affect how adolescents experience relationships. In some cultures, same-sex relationships may be stigmatized, while others, gender fluid fluidity may be more accepted, such as in many Asian countries, gay marriage is still not legal. And so a lot of people actually move out of the countries just to get married. Many cultures also have very strong gender roles and views on masculinity and femininity within relationships. So just like I said earlier in social media, there's these gender roles that are changing very, very fast in Western cultures, but in some Middle Eastern cultures, they're getting more and more strict because of they have to rein in people from social media and stuff like that.
Okay. Another specific instance that has affected adolescents is in this generation is COVID-19. And this didn't just affect adolescents in the United States, but also just worldwide. Because people more will talk about the academic effects of COVID-19, but there's many social effects of it too. First, COVID-19 was a worldwide lockdown that caused social distancing of many non-essential needs. So the schools were closed, sports, clubs, all of them were closed, so there was no connection between adolescents. They were socially isolated from their friends, and this limited their interactions and disconnected them from others. For a lot of people that were more extroverted, this caused increases in depression, and for everyone in general, at least an increase in loneliness. But there were also some, besides just the negatives, some positives to COVID, and that was like for the closer friendships, they were challenged and strengthened through this time. For families, they got to spend more time together in their house, and then they also had deeper connections, like how we had said with social media. They got to find like time to meet others online that experience the same things and share experiences so that they didn't feel alone. And then for research in general provides information to people to understand their roles in other people's lives and how they can help it. Understand where someone is coming from and have empathy for one another. There could be more research that, because I didn't find much on it, where the indirect relationships in a child's life can affect them. Like if the parents have a good relationship and the child is viewing this, whether or not that is good or bad, how they will internally then view romantic relationships for themselves down the line. And then also just making sure school counselors or even parents are well diverse in the research and always keeping up with new research on how to help adolescents, whether that's helping them manage their emotions, to help communicate their problems, and help address issues in their lives.